Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Day 9 Daily number 326. I'm here with Root Destiny. We just got an intro to his Zergling Infestor style, where I think the way you described the Destiny was it's someone who had likely never seen it before. Is that?
Yeah.
And it just worked really well, and the Infestor play just killed off his Nexus, and there you go. The second game is a game between Destiny and Liquid Huck that they were playing in some practice games. Let's go ahead and just hop on over to it, and I'm just going to do the 3, 2, 1 play, and I'm going to hit ×2, so I'm at ×2 now. So you are spawning at the right on Shattered Temple, and Huck is spawning at the top, also on Shattered Temple. So yeah, tell us a little bit about how this strategy would change from map to map. It doesn't feel that map dependent. I actually think I might even prefer it on this map.
I think it works pretty well on most maps. I think it's really important to be aggressive. I make a lot of those early Zerglings and I don't use them right away, so it's really good to keep those Zerglings active and tearing down rocks everywhere.
Yeah. So we do see you going
tearing
for
down the rocks to his third early on. It gives me more options to harass and whatnot.
Yeah, that's one thing that I love about Shattered Temple, and we've even seen Sheth do that in almost every single game he's ever played on this map, and has had a lot of success with those ninja-esque counterattacks. And also, I wanted to note that you and I actually watched this replay and talked about it a little bit beforehand. So, because I like rigged shows, I'm going to ask you some of the same questions I did there. So we see your 11 pool popping up, and there is the Zergling going down. I noticed that there's no Overlord. I guess that's another important opener question, that you don't build the Overlord before 18, that you opt for the hatchery first.
I like to get the hatchery out a little bit earlier. Sometimes, and I don't know this exactly, I don't know how to explain this exactly, but if I feel like the protoss is going to block my hatchery, then I'll start the Overlord before putting it down. If I feel like I can get the hatchery down without it, then I'll start the hatchery earlier.
And amazingly, these Zerglings are able to waltz to his base and get some scouting information. Is this common to be able to do this?
Yeah, in certain positions, I would say so. The 11 pool is a lot earlier than most protosses are expecting, so usually the 2 lings can make it inside the base. But like I said earlier, I don't think you can get very much good scouting information with these lings. It'll be in his base until he gets a ranged unit, and then it'll die, and then he'll decide which tech route he wants to go down.
Yeah. And it looks like he's just going to go ahead and build those 2 gateways right in the middle of where your Zergling can go wander around and see it, but it looks like your poor Zergling is fine. Alright, well, whatever. Looks like at the front of your base, you now are transferring a bunch of units, and do you just make slow Zerglings as necessary, or do you prefer some sort of spine crawler defense?
Typically I'll grab 1 spine, and then I'll just use a few slow Zerglings, and that'll just kind of shut down any early, like, 2 Stalker, 1 Zealot, or 3 Stalker harass. You just have to be careful about stuff like that. Since I get speed later, it's a little bit harder to defend against that sometimes.
And there's the 2 spine crawlers going down right now, and we see, I'm actually going to pause it here at 7 minutes, so there, I paused it. We see 2 extractors in the main, and it looks like 3rd and 4th are a little bit behind. Is this, again, a lot more to do with just like your comfort in the moment, where you're just kind of like, I think I can get more gas? Because I noticed even in this game you got 2 spine crawlers a lot earlier, so I mean, it kind of makes sense, that trade-off.
Yeah, I dropped 2 spine crawlers a little bit earlier, so I also start dropping my gases a little bit earlier. Like I said, I'm still kind of feeling out the early game and when exactly those gases go down, and it kind of changes based upon what's going on in the early game.
Now, I want to note that the 7-minute mark, actually probably more like 6:30-ish, I think is like the most important moment if your Protoss opponent opens up with these 3 gateways, because that's where like his tech route is going to be most revealed. Like, you know, if he's going for Dark Templar, he can only really have 4 sentries out at that point in time because of all the gas he's spending on the Twilight Council and the Dark Shrine. Or if he's going for, you know, just a more standard big gateway opening, he'll have like 6, 7, 8 sentries. What are other techniques that you use, or do you use those, and how do they sort of fit into this opening that you're doing?
My opener stays pretty constant based on what they do, but what you said before, I think the most important part of like the 6.5 minute mark is seeing what units the Protoss is making. Against a good Protoss player, I don't think it's possible to get any good information with an Overlord because their tech is going to be too well hidden, and it's too much of a gamble, it's too much of a coin flip on whether you may or may not scout it. So I think your best bet is normally just to scout the entrance of the base. If you're at the 6-minute mark and they've got 1 Zealot and 1 Sentry, and that's it, and then you get to like the 6.5 minute mark, and there's just 1 Zealot and 1 Sentry. Maybe a 2nd Zealot pops out. I mean, all Protoss openings pretty much open with the gas coming down right after the gateway, and then right after the Cybercore. So the gas has to be going somewhere. So at that point, you assume either Dark Templars or early Stargates or something weird like that. I mean, obviously, if Dark Templar go
Yeah.
down earlier, if I feel Dark Templar coming, I'll throw down the Evo Chamber, get a Spore Crawler, but yeah.
Alright, sweet. I'm resuming it in 3, 2, 1, play. Because we've seen the early game pretty much up until this point, and I suspect that we'll end up seeing that layer pop down in just a moment. We see another little early push, and it looks like you're going to be just fine against this. You're building a couple of Zerglings, but not too many, it appears. Looks like you're just feeling fairly comfortable.
Yep, just a few to kind of be safe. This isn't like Tal'Darim. I know the Protosses tend to favor 3-gate Expo or 1-gate Expo more on this map, which can lend itself to more units than a Forge First Expo. That's probably why I put down the 2 spines in this situation. I'm grabbing a few lanes now just to be safe.
And there's the layer, there's the 2 Evo Chambers, and again, you're stopping at 40 drones. And it's kind of an easy number to count, as you mentioned before, that you just count 16 drones at each mineral patch, maybe a few short, and then 3 in each geyser. And one thing that I love that you're doing is you're sending these Zerglings out all around the map right away, knocking down your back rocks, knocking down these destructible rocks, knocking down these backdoor rocks to his base. And this just gives you so many options. And I think that you said before that this was one of your early iterations of doing this build.
I think so. I was still kind of getting the timings down on doing this exact, the 6-burrowed Infestor push, yeah.
So what I want to do
but the concept is still pretty much the same, I think, between these games and what I'm trying to do now.
So I didn't tell you, but I paused it at 10 minutes and 30 seconds, because I think we're going to go ahead and slow the game down now. Because what we've seen is essentially you are able to get away with the same opening that you did on Tal'Darim. There are adjustments that you could make to it to be able to deal with Dark Templar, to be able to deal with those sort of Void Rays, and they're all fairly intuitive and rely on that unit counting. So now all of a sudden we're at a point where it's mid-game time, and as you mentioned before, Huck is going to start doing some good decisions, and we want to make sure that we can get the chance to focus on those and what sort of information you're going to be grabbing. So I'm at 10 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm paused at the faster speed. So I'm going to resume in 3, 2, 1, play. So you have some Zerglings rushing over to the left side of the map because I think every single race tries to take their third like as ridiculously fast as humanly possible. You're taking your third. Your fourth looks like it's going to be popping up in just a moment. But are you still going to be going for that big, crazy Infestor play thing right at the start where you try to break down the door with the infested Terrans?
I think I might, but not as extreme as I was before. I think in these games I'm still a little bit more concerned with trying to set up expansions a little bit sooner.
And it looks like your counterattack working well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, oh, actually, I want to pause. I see this just mass Zergling run into the base around 11 minutes and 30 seconds. Can you talk a little bit about when you do this and why? It looks like you're going to lose a big chunk of Zerglings here.
Yeah, it was pretty poorly conceived. Actually, it was a really great idea. I wasn't patient enough. A lot of players, I think, it's good to keep in mind the psychology of the game a lot. Like you can figure out a lot of information based on what you expect your opponent to do. And actually, the reason why I felt this Ling run by was going to work really well isn't by anything that's at its front. It's more that if you look on the northwest corner of the map, I sniped his third using a whole bunch of Lings. And not a whole bunch. I had like 8 Lings up there.
Yeah.
So anytime I can do that, my idea is if I bring Lings up to snipe the third, I know he's going to move over to clear it out. He's probably going to move the large majority of his forces. And when he moves those forces over, there's a chance that I could sneak in a whole bunch of Lings to his main base and either snipe tech buildings, get good scouting information, or maybe even kill a Nexus or a bunch of probes.
Yeah.
But in here, I just jumped the gun a little bit too soon, and I should have waited a little bit longer for his army to go over before running all the Lings in.
Yeah, so in the future, you would just check to see if this was available. And if you saw a bunch of units, you just back right off again.
Correct. A more mature decision would have been to send one Ling in first to see where his army was exactly.
But that's fine. When you have a chance to win against Huck, you take it. So we're going to go ahead and resume in 1, 2...
And it's good on the Korean server because I can always blame latency too. I'll just blame latency for
good
this
point.
decision.
Well argued. 3, 2, 1, playing it. And it looks like you do get some stuff into the main. I note that you get Overlord speed quite early. Are there ways in which you're going to try to use this? Do you do a lot of spreading of Overlords? We didn't see as much of it in the previous game.
Yeah, there wasn't so much in the previous game because I did so much damage with the first attack, but I really like to spread Overlords to every expo on the map to give me a lot of vision.
Oh, you jerk! You have Burrow. And you're doing all sorts of counterattacks from all angles. And, you know, one thing that I think is so important to note is that splitting units up and dealing damage with them in multiple locations is severely underexplored. I mean, Losira has been exploiting a lot of this in his recent styles and whatnot. But, I mean, even with the detection and even with these small areas for Destiny to work through, you can still see that there's so much damage. And with the Burrow, God, that's so awesome. That kicks ass. So per usual, we see your delayed +2. No +2 armor going down at this point. So I'm coming to the unit counting station. I'm noticing that you're quite low on Zerglings. You have 33 of them. You do have your 7 Infestors up. And you've just lost a bunch of units. Which, it's kind of funny to note, Zerglings are rarely the unit that gives you a lot of momentum. Generally, it's something like Mutalisks, or the Infestors themselves. How are you dealing with the fact that suddenly you have a lot fewer Zerglings than you normally have? And what's like your plan for the mid-game?
Well, I mean, I just did some decent harasses on both bases. I feel like he's going to be at least a little bit defensive. I can't see him wanting to move out immediately after that,
Yeah.
especially knowing that I could be all-ending behind it or something weird like that. I did lose a lot of lings at this front. I don't know if you saw, he put down some really nice force fields.
Oh,
and I probably
yeah.
had like 24 lings just trapped in that one spot. But I mean, right now I'm just kind of, I've got my little lings running around, I've got my Infestors coming on. I'm just working on maybe trying to deny the third for as long as possible, while kind of getting my own macro rolling, trying to get my third base up, trying to get towards my hive tech, and hopefully putting down my fourth at that goal pretty soon.
I think it's amazing to note that this burrow is helping so much. He's just wasting a couple extra force fields here and there. It almost forces him to have additional observers. I don't know what the hell's going on with this rally point on the Nexuses. There's a rally of probes there at the south. There you go. There's a free president. If we come to the resource tab, ooh, my goodness, 13 workers killed. Num num num. Most of them are just still being rallied down there. Oh, that's so funny. So, at this point, it looks like you're positioned to put pressure on the left. Actually, I'm going to pause. I'm at 1450. It looks like you were positioned to put pressure on this west area, but you didn't yet move in. Is there a reason why you had all the units there, but were just sort of waiting and biding your time for it?
I was just getting ready to. I was about to do the first thing, the move that I'd done before. The idea here was all of these lings on the west were going to go up the ramp. I was going to lob 40 infested Terrans behind that. I was going to kill that whole structure. All the 2 warp gates, the 2 cannons, the 3 pylons definitely would have died. And when he moved his army to the west to take care of it, and once I'd seen his army move to the west, I was going to bring these lings in the front into the either the main or the natural expansion to start doing damage over there. Kind of like what I did early on in the beginning of the game.
Well, that's a great point. Nice little tactics. We're going to resume in 3, 2, 1, play. So you see that there's this huge army pushing out right now. A very intimidating looking Protoss force. It's actually a very sort of modern Korean-style push with the 2 Colossi instead of waiting for that many more. It looks like some of your Infestors are slow, so they die. But what is your thought process when you see this army? I'm actually going to pause it at 15 minutes and 20 seconds because I want to talk a little bit about sort of like battle psychology, because in a lot of circumstances there's times when the opponent is supposed to move out because my strategy is designed to kill it off. So if I would see that push coming, I'd be like, yes, time to crush it. And I'd have some sort of big preparation ready. It looks like you have kind of a thin army at this point. You have 7 Infestors and you have 56 Zerglings. In production, it looks like you only have 8 more Zerglings popping out. So, I mean, part of me wants to feel the sort of gut response when I see that. But tell us a little bit about how you're going to deal with this army. And let's actually resume it in a 3, 2, 1, and you can talk a little bit about that. So 3, 2, 1, play.
Okay, my idea is always I want to neural parasite the Colossus to remove him from battle. The Colossus shooting on my lings, I'm going to lose lings very quickly. So fungling on Stalkers to keep them in place and neural parasiting the Colossus is always like #1 priority over everything else. And like I said, I'm not even worried about the Colossus doing damage to his army. I just want him not killing all of my lings super fast because mass lings will clean up everything else on the ground very, very quickly.
Yeah, that's actually remarkably easy looking, because 56 Zerglings versus this sort of army just gets decimated so quickly. And it's interesting to note that the 2 Colossus are the only things that end up really surviving that army. So when you see a Protoss move out like that, do you just get the insta fist pump where you're like, got him? Or like, what goes through your mind when you see that?
It's not a got him at all though. It's the double-edged sword that is the Infestor Ling, is that it all comes down to micro control. If you try to do this strategy and your micro's not tip-top, or you're not making really good decisions about when to fungal, when to neural parasite, or when to drop infested Terrans, and when to bring your lings in, it's very, very easy to lose your entire army and kill absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
For instance, in that situation, if he would have force fielded off all of my Infestors and then trapped my lings in a box and I didn't get anything down, I could lose everything, and then I would get steamrolled, and it would look like I have no idea what I'm doing.
So I noticed that
with
all
this
your
strategy, it's never.
Oh, do go
It's
ahead.
never quite like a fist pump, like, oh, I know I'm going to kill it here. It's more of you just have to be positioned well, and you have to be very smart and very active about how you're using your Infestor spells.
So now you're going into the mass expand mode. I think we talked a little bit about this, that you said that before you really should be taking your third and fourth faster because we see that there's all this extra money built up. And generally, anytime you have extra money in the bank, it's a sign that you should either be doing exactly what you're doing faster or that you just need to build more stuff, like an extra hatch. So I remember you just, preferring the acceleration to the having more stuff. And also, I noticed that this Infestor army generally stays clumped. I see your control group 2 is almost all Infestors. Are you starting to lean more towards like leaving 2 Infestors maybe to the right, and then like your main army here, and then 2 to the sides? That way, it's more difficult to force field. Like, are there micro control adjustments you make from game to game that are pretty big?
On big battles, I like to have my Infestors usually a little bit separate, but it kind of depends too. I don't like to have them too separate so that 4 Blink Stalkers could just blink off, pick them off, and leave them really exposed. I mean, it really depends. Every situation is incredibly unique. There is no, like, here's the strategy guide on how to win with Infestors versus an enemy. Like, every situation, the terrain, the army comp, the time in the game, everything is really dependent on everything else. It's very variable.
So I see now that you are getting the drop, and I remember when we originally saw this game, I was asking you why you didn't do dropping a little bit earlier on in these games, or why you weren't doing them a little bit more throughout. So if you could talk about that again, please.
Again, this kind of goes, and this might sound a little bit like I'm making excuses. I do think that I actually have just started throwing down a Baneling Nest at this point, a little bit after the fourth goes down, to work in Baneling drops on mineral lines.
Yeah.
But again, with my philosophy on Zerg, I don't actually feel too pressured to harass my opponent. Conventional Zerg styles say you have to keep harassing, you've got to keep shutting him down, you can't let him get a big production going. I don't actually mind if he gets to his 200 death ball, because I'm very confident that my 200 armies are going to be on the same level as his, and I know that I have 2 more bases than him right now, so I don't mind duking it out in the middle at the same time. That being said, I mean, I have a lot of resources here. There's nothing wrong with, and I am doing some dropping now, there's nothing wrong with incorporating more dropping in play. I just hadn't evolved my strategy that far yet.
Yeah, because, I mean, wow, so many infested Terrans. And I also guess should ask, you're doing this huge push, this double-pronged attack at the front and sides, and again, just nabbing all of these Colossi. And is the mindset just that my army is so powerful if I can get off these neural parasites, so I'm pulling back with this drop? Or would the... I'm actually going to pause because there's so many pretty explosions going on, I can't think properly.
Yeah.
Generally, when you do a 2-pronged attack, the logic is, well, he can either defend one or the other, but not both very well. Sometimes it's, I want to distract him, I want to pull all his units back so that way I can drill through the front. And that kind of looks like it's happening here, where the Protoss brought so many units back into the main to deal with like the 25 infested Terrans that you could just walk up to the Colossi. But is there a situation in which this sort of battle wouldn't work so well? Because coming back, I'm paused now at 21-12, and we just see total havoc being unleashed by, like, everything. You're neural parasiting everything, and the probes are getting killed by the Colossi, and everything looks awesome.
I think with the unit composition I have right now, I don't think there is a way for it to be a bad battle for me. Chokes are actually advantageous when you have a lot of infestors, because little clumped units means that I can drop really sexy fungal growths, and the neural parasites on the Colossus make the Colossus work for me much better as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's typically the idea is you want to pull part of his army away so that your attack at the front is more effective. Also, and again, another micro I kind of made is I jumped the gun a little bit on this attack. My Ultras should always lead, and then my Lings should come in from behind. I lost almost all my Lings before my Ultras finally caught up to the battle there. So still in the Brood War mentality, I guess, where Ultras and Lings are the same speed when they have their upgrades. Nobody's ever seen that. Ultras are ridiculously fast in Brood.
I'm going to resume in 1, 2, 3, play. Yeah, that's one of the biggest tragedies of the modern StarCraft 2 times. The slowness of the Ultralisk. And I will say, though, that you have lost, it looks like almost all your Infestors. I see that there's only 3 left on the map. And Protoss has a pretty gigantic army. I mean, he lost the bulk of his Colossi, which are generally that, like, big damage-dealing unit. But it feels like the Stalkers are just as much of a threat, especially now they're coming forward with these 2-1 upgrades, blinking forward. You have a good amount of Zerglings. But what's going through your head at this point?
I'm not really worried about Manic Stalkers. I know that Koreans favor them a lot, but with heavy infested usage, bundles really stack up over time.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, if you get a lot of fungals up, if you got a lot of links together, stalkers will die very, very, very quickly. Especially without a lot of Colossus supporting them, or with a lot of sentries to force field.
I also even see that you have those infestors in the back of the base. Zerglings now rushing up to this natural expansion, and it looks like Huck's getting a little bit more of a foothold, but at this point in the game, I think this is where most Zergs generally lose, where the Protoss has 4 bases secured, you do have 6 bases up, but you're running a little bit low in your natural expansion. Are you just going to keep drilling with Ultraling Infestor?
Yeah, I mean, as long as I feel like my trades are somewhat okay, I don't even have to trade 1-for-1 right now. I'm running 6 bases, right? 6, I kinda, yeah, and he's only on 4. So, I mean, we can trade all day like this. I don't even mind if the trades are a little bit in his favor, because eventually he's just going to wear out. When you use these heavy army comps, there is no Protoss death ball. It's not like, oh my god, he's got 6 board raids and 6 claws, and now I can't kill anything, and my whole stuff's gonna die, you know? Using Infestors with Neural Parasite and Fungal well enough, I think it's always possible to trade favorably with a Protoss, or at least on an even level.
And one note that I want to add to that the Neural Parasite on the Void Ray, I think is severely underused. I think most people try to Fungal Void Rays, but Neural Parasiting Void Rays is so good. Holy cow.
Yeah. Yeah, Fungal can take a long time to kill him. By the time you've dropped enough Fungals to kill him, your whole army's probably going to be dead. I actually prefer to Neural Parasite and start dropping Infested Terrans and then targeting them down while they're Neural Parasited.
Yeah, I've seen you do that a lot with Vikings. We also see that this battle looked like it may have gone bad for you on paper. I mean, the units lost tab, it looks like you're still losing a little bit more in resources, but I mean, it's still important to note that Huck is behind on food. You basically have the exact same army that just died popping up right now, and now going for a little bit more drops. And I think I'd mentioned to you before that I felt like Baneling bombing, maybe starting 5 minutes ago, would have been a really strong addition to this, because it wouldn't be that much more resources, especially when you have all these extra bases down south.
Yeah, definitely.
But you're just going to keep doing the Ultra Ling drops, and I guess I'm worried about the fact that Protoss has now sort of established a nice wall with his 5th.
Yeah, those are never good. Ideally, you want to scout that kind of stuff going up before it ever goes down, because once those walls are established, they can be really, really, really difficult to break through, especially with sentries and everything. But unfortunately, I was just too late on scouting it.
We see that there's the huge drop in the main, the huge drop with the natural expansion, the blink going on with the Stalkers. And it looks like you just... Would you say that you got a little bit lucky with this Zergling bust on the left? I kind of feel like if he had had just a few Zealots and some Force Fields, he could have been able to get the good read on this in time. The Zerglings got the chance to slip in there pretty uncontested.
Possibly. He actually had 1 Zealot blocking it, I just focused it down. I think it's reasonable to expect that it would be hard for him to respond to everything. I mean, I had a drop in his main, and I had Lings at the front of his base, and Lings running into the side.
Yeah,
I don't think it's unrealistic to assume that he's not going to be able to perfectly block all 3 attacks.
You know, this just makes me so happy, because it looks so much like StarCraft 1 Zerg, where Zerg does nothing but lose armies and kill Nexuses, and is like, yeah, I'm winning!
Yeah.
So and now I see you popping out a lot of roaches. Is this purely due to the High Templar?
Yeah. Once High Templar are on the field, Lings get absolutely nom-nommed. Like, it's not even funny how quickly Lings will die.
Really? Oh, so roaches, in a sense, are your replacement for the Zerglings?
Yep.
Oh, so would you ever just dash out a few more Zerglings to do drops, or is it just more important to have, like, the correct army mix?
I feel like 4 Infestor drops are really, really, really strong. Maybe dishing out a few more Lings to drop could be nice, but it seems like you need more than 8 to do any kind of damage. Just because Blink Stalkers are so mobile and can bounce around bases really quickly. If you're only dropping like 4 to 8 Lings, you're not going to be able to kill anything very fast.
And do you have any special terminology for a drop of 4 Infestors?
Yeah, that's the four Fester Bro Squad.
Alright, okay, good. Alright, we call that fan service for any of you who haven't been in Hollywood, so... looks like you're just continuing to just hurl armies, and I mean, in almost every attack that you've had before this point, wow. In almost every attack that you've had before this point, there's been an attack going on elsewhere, but this just looks like a straight push where you're going to end up pretty much losing everything without much of an issue for Huck. I mean,
I think he lost.
Huh?
quite a bit there. I think you lost a decent amount there.
Yeah.
If you check the army tabs, I still got a lot of stuff. Again, these trades, I will go back to blaming latency on everything, right? For any poor strategic decisions, blame latency.
Yeah.
No. Some of the attacks I made here were a little bit sloppy, and I probably could have positioned them a little bit better. But my mentality still remains the same, in that I am up on bases, and I am up on food. So as long as I'm up, I don't mind trading unequally if I can wear them down enough to deny those other bases too.
And it looks like you were just continuing to wear him down, and finally Huck's money's starting to dwindle. In favor of time, I'm actually going to speed this up to a ×2. And it looks like you are just continuing to build Zerglings, Roaches, you have the Nidus Worm going up, and in true Swarm style, there's another Nidus Worm popping up. And so throughout this entire point, are you ever feeling worried if he does blank, and oh, I'm looking for blah? Or did you hit the 6 bases, start producing the Roaches, and said, okay, I'm in control right now?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's nothing really that he can do at this point, because, I mean, I'm just putting on constant aggression. Basically, what I'm worried about is him setting up more bases. That's my focal point right now. I can't let him get more bases. I shouldn't have let him take the 5th over on the western side, so I've spent a lot of time harassing that. And I definitely don't want him to take the 6th, you know?
Yeah,
I also don't want to sit around on a maxed army, because I know that I'm going to be maxed before him, and the only thing that can possibly happen once you're maxed and your opponent isn't, is your opponent will close the gap. So all I'm looking to do is get to 200, 200, trade as soon as possible, and continue repeating that scenario for as long as possible, while keeping him off of an equal number of bases.
And it looks like it's just a straightforward process of whittling down. And so while this game wraps up, I guess I'd want to ask, at what point do you feel like it's the hardest hump to get over? Because, I mean, right now I think it's pretty by the book, and you said that you're sort of worried about more bases coming down. Is there a certain time in gameplay where you're like, man, if he gets that 4th base up now, I'm done? Or if he gets X unit mix up now, I'm done?
Not really, actually. The most fragile point in time is after the first 6 Infestors lay their infested Terrans down, but due to the nature of having 4 bases, having your Hive Tech, and having the Roach Warren down, there's just not too much to be worried about. My biggest worries using this kind of unit composition are really, 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 really bad attacks for me. I made a couple this game that were borderline there, where just the micro's not there, or just the decision making was just not there, to where you're losing a whole bunch of units, and you're not able to replace your army, because you make some really bad trades.
And
I also think harassing from the protoss could be effective here too, which is something that, I don't know, at least on my time on the Korean server, I don't see too much of protosses doing harasses. But
yeah, do you have any trouble with DTs in long-term games like that?
Yeah. Ideally, I should be throwing down a Spore and some Spines at every base. I think I've got some defending the 5th and 6th. I didn't have any at my gold, though. DT harasses are a real pain when they come in via Warp Prism, not so much when they come running in the middle of the field or from the front, because with an Infestor, you can snag them with a Fungal Growth and shut them down pretty easily.
Gosh, Infestors are so good.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really, really versatile unit.
So as we're going to wrap up this part 2, where we got the chance to look at a little bit of a longer game, we got to see a lot of the decisions that are made in the late stages in terms of hitting the opponent all over the place, and most importantly, we got to see that the Infestors were useful all game long, that it wasn't just a little step in there, but that they are the critical piece to almost all the attacks until you get a huge advantage. So in this last part we're going to look at in part 3 is we're first going to look at a game which is a really clean, straightforward, easy win with the Zergling Infestor push. We're going to wrap it up with a potential way to lose. We're going to look at a loss with this style. And then of course Q&As for Destiny. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere. Part 2 has only just ended, which means that part 3 has yet to begin. See you then!